Hi, everyone, and welcome to another TOEFL prep lesson. I'm just going to make sure the messages are available here, and I'm going to get them on another. Make sure I can see your comments and let you guys know that we're live now. So I can see, yeah, a couple of people starting to view, so that's great. I think I can see my audio is working. So if you can, please let me know that you can hear my audio correctly. I'm gonna have to probably check, see here on the video, make sure that's working. Now that you can hear my audio, yeah, okay, yeah, you can hear my audio, great. So hi Ksenia, hi Anastasia, hi Anna, so thanks for joining. So hi everyone, let us know where you are from. Okay. Maybe we'll get the, make sure. Okay, so hi Peter or Piotr, hi Ksenia. Yeah, so great. So to improve a little bit of the quality of the image, make sure you go to the settings function on the video and switch this to, for the quality, switch this up to like quality, and that will really make sure that you can see my screen, and a more crisper you'll have there. So, okay, so hi David, hi Tatiana, hi Vlad, hi Daria, so great. Okay, so can some of you tell me if you have attended some of the other sessions for the speaking section, for the writing section, for the reading, and today we're looking at the listening. So we're going to work today on the listening section. Sorry, I'm just making sure I can get the audio files working because we're going to be working on listening. So so please let me know if you have attended some of the other listening. I'm sorry, the other videos that we for the other sections. So please let me know that. And so also is to sample like a conversation and a lecture for the lecture for the listening section. And we're going to go through a couple of questions. There's going to be about like 11 questions, 5 questions for the conversation and 6 questions for the lecture. And we'll take a look at like note-taking practice with that. If you have like notes, note paper and a pencil or pen, if you can get that ready so that while you're going through the listening audio files, you can take notes. I'll be taking my notes, and then you can kind of compare them on the screen and see the difference between those. So let me just see here. Okay, so let me just make sure I can get the audio file working. That's working.
Listen to a conversation.
Okay, great. Did you just hear a little bit of the audio file that said "listen to a conversation"? If you could hear that, please let me know. I'll just play that shortly again.
Listen to a conversation.
Okay, make sure if you can hear that little phrase, that listen to a conversation. Yes, yes, great. Okay, that's excellent. I'm happy to hear that because that's that's going to be the point of today's exercise, is working with these conversations. So so what I would like to do today, as I mentioned here, is we're going to look. I'm going to put my slides up in a moment, so you can see just a little bit of what the listening section is. It's, in theory, it's a little less intimidating than the reading section, as you could see from the last time. Like, even for me as a native speaker, the reading section and just the types of questions and sometimes the tricky answers can be a little misleading. So I really am not a big fan of the reading section, and I would definitely recommend that you do that, take that seriously, and do as many practice exercises as possible, because you don't want to get a bad surprise on the day of the exam and say like, oh, I wish I had done more reading practice. In my experience, when I took the listening section, I mean, and when I took the TOEFL test about like now almost 3 months ago at the beginning of February, I got a 28 on the reading, I got a 29 on listening, a 30 on speaking, a 30 on writing. I thought I did a great job in listening, but apparently I missed 1 point. So you do still have to take good notes, and you still need to kind of pay attention to the details in the questions. I do feel that listening, note-taking, I probably took way too many notes than I had to. But I think what I call that is the curse of being a native speaker, because, and I see this with students all the time, is that if you have a very advanced level with your listening skills, it's possible that you understand everything, and as a result, you want to take down dictation, prioritizing the information. You're not necessarily making sense of it while you're listening to it. You're dictating and transcribing what you understand. So it's important that you don't just transcribe everything that you understood or try to just get verbatim. So that's not the point of note-taking with this. But you do need to take good notes, but they don't have to be so obsessive. Like intermediate or a little bit above. Some other listening skills might filter out, like it might limit them from being able to take like exhaustive notes. So it is important to have a little bit of a kind of making sense of what I'm listening to. Realize that this, in the listening section itself, it's like it's the only section on the test that is not integrated. So what I mean by that is, well, the speaking section and the writing section, you have to do a combination of like listening, reading, and speaking, or listening, reading, and writing. The reading section, I mean, it is not integrated in the sense that you read and then transfer that skills. But the difficulty with the reading section is really like you have to read a lot of this material. You have the time limit. You need to make sense of what the question is. You have to make sense of all the tricky little answers and focus, and have to deal with the external criteria, the atmosphere of the testing center. You have noise. You can have other people around you. You can have a problem with, maybe, like in my experience, there's a drill, so that was just distractions. You can have noise in this testing center and all that stuff. By the time you get to the listening section, the next one, you have your headphones on. He's walked into the room. You've now had about an hour of like people getting settled, getting used to the computer, getting used to the test. They've started to forget about like their life outside of the test. You start to get into the zone, and you start focusing, and you just kind of, you're listening, paying attention, taking some notes. I would also recommend with your pencil, to make sure that the pencil works. You don't want it to like suddenly break the lead the moment that the listening audio starts, since you only have one time to listen to those conversations or lectures. So you want to be able to take the notes and test the pencil sharpener, make sure that works. But you just have to kind of listen. When you get to the questions, the questions are a lot are about 1 sentence long as well. So the questions and the answers are intimidating than they would be on the reading section. They still can be you have to be sensitive to the kind of content that is in them, and your notes can help you. Overall, though, I would say that I didn't exactly have to look back at my notes as much as I thought I was going to have to do that. It was mostly just to be able to organize some of the information and make sure I didn't lose a detail. I would still make sure to keep taking notes, because some of these conversations and lectures can be about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So it's a lot of information that you can put into that amount of time. I would not try to just use my memory. I would definitely make sure I took notes, because you won't have access to the recording a second time. You do have, in the case of like a lecture, a technical term that would be that you wouldn't know and that they would expect you not to know. They will give you a picture with that word kind of written on a chalkboard kind of a thing. Like they'll write down this technical term, like in a biology lecture. They will give that, or if it's something biographical, they'll put the name of a famous person that they're talking about. So you don't have to kind of, how do I spell that person's name or something? They'll show it to you. So some of those obviously technical terms, they will give them to you. So you don't have to get distracted on that. And then they'll give you a little bit of a picture to orient it, so you can see, okay, here is a student talking with a professor. Okay, I'm in a conversation. Okay, here's a professor standing next to a blackboard. Okay, that's a lecture. So I can kind of anticipate what I'm going to listen to. I would also recommend on your note paper, just like on one of them, because you'll probably have multiple pieces of paper that you can use, at least on one of them, keep track of where you are in the listening section, because you're going to have at least 6 of these audio recordings. So, and if you're in one of these experimental ones where they're testing out new material, you could get up to 9. So it's either you get 6 or you get the 9. Sorry, my fingers were wrong there. You either get 6 or you get 9 audio files. So I'll explain that in a second, a little bit more in detail. But it basically, in the reading section, you could get, normally you would have 3 passages, and if it's experimental, you could get 4. And so then instead of doing 60 minutes with 3 reading passages, you could get 4 and then go up to 80 minutes. But if that's the case, if you have that extra 4th reading, you're not going to get extra listening. They're not going to torture you to have 4 reading passages and on top of that 9 lectures and conversations. They're going to do either this, they're going to do both, or you could get neither one. So you could just have a normal TOEFL test, which could be 3 reading passages, 6 audio passages, and then your 6 speaking questions and your 2 essays. That would be a normal test. But if you get the experimental one, you're going to have either an extra reading passage or 3 extra listening audios there. So it's good to be aware of that. I have some students who neglected that, or that forgot about that, and then they write me back after the test and said, I had extra material in the reading section or the listening section. I'm like, what happens? And I was like, I think I told you that could happen. And so be aware that going into the test, you could have what's considered a normal, just nothing out of the ordinary there, or ETS, the education testing service that is creating these tests. They constantly try to update the materials, and they are testing them out. I mean, they're testing, but they're experimenting to see student feedback, to see if it made sense, if it worked, and so they won't tell you which ones they are, but you need to do all your work like as best as you can with that. So so as you are going through the listening section, I would keep track on a little piece of paper at the top and just say like, okay, conversations, I should have 2 of them. Lectures with just the teacher, I should have 2 of them. Lectures with student participation, where they might be asking questions, getting some feedback, I should have 2 of those. So as you're going through these, you don't have to write down something exhaustive, but just get on your piece of paper like conversation, lecture with students, lecture without, and when I take notes, I usually put W/ is with and W/O is without, and that's a way for me to just get a little bit of shorthand on my notes. And that way, as you've gone through two of these audio passages, you know like what to expect, what's coming up. So okay, I've done a conversation with the professor. I've done a lecture without the student participation. Okay, I've got 4 left. I should expect another conversation. I expect another lecture, another lecture. So that way you can kind of keep your sanity on there, because it's easy to kind of like, it'll say like end of this section, and you're like, is it really the end of the section? I only did 2. So they'll do them kind of in groups of 2s. So you will have that in, and then you'll know if like, okay, did I finish the section? Is this really complete? And then I'm in the 10-minute break, or wait, like where am I? So that can be a little disorienting if you don't keep track of that. So I mean, you have your notes, but because it goes by very fast for the time, you don't want to be flipping pages back and forth to like, how many have I done so far? So if you have a little bit on your notes, that's a good way to keep track of that. I'm going to take a look at some of the questions, comments here. So okay. So again, a lot of highs and yeses that you can hear the audios and stuff. Okay, so I'm going to put my the screen with the presentation. You won't see me for a little bit. You'll still hear me, and then we'll get into the audio, so you can take listen to this. I'm going to be taking some notes while I also listen to it, so you'll see kind of my reaction to listening to these lectures and conversation. There'll be one of each, just for the sake of time for today. Get like the notes and try to compare them if you can take notes on your own. Like what was difficult in that and what could have been tricky. And then we'll look at the questions that'll be for each one of those listening passages. And then we'll look at the corrections of those, the answers, the correct answers, and then we'll go on to the next one. And then I will take your questions, the test. And I also ask you a little bit of kind of what is it that you would like to see going forward, because as you can imagine, this is like the 4th section that we've gone through. So we've done the speaking section, we've done the writing section, we've done the reading section, and today now we're looking at the listening section, and it's a little bit more limited in the type of content that's on there. And I'd like to see going forward what materials, what you would like to see prepare for these lessons, these webinars, since they are for you. We want to provide you a lot of content. We want to make sure that we're giving you what you need to prepare for the test. So keep that in mind. So towards the end of this, feel free to let me know. And I think we're going to start in the next week or so. I think we're going to start getting like a survey of people who have been attending these lessons to get an idea, get your feedback. Has been helpful for you. I hope it has, and what you would like to see next. In terms of content or lesson material. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to screen my screen, and in a second I will ask you if you can confirm that you can see that. So just 1 second here. Okay, can you see my screen? if it should say TOEFL lesson number 14, listening section. So if you can see that, can you please say, yes, I can see it? It looks like I can see it on my screen. So make sure like you have the screen kind of full size so you can see that. Yes, from Anna. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so yes, from Yulia and Daria. Thank you. Thank you for those confirmations. Okay, great. So, so as you know, yeah, we're looking at the listening section today, and we're going to look at what is in the listening section. I've mentioned that a little bit so far, but we're going to go a little bit for this. So you got the two conversations between a student and a professor. One of them is very academic. They could be like, I don't know, a student needs to talk about the research paper or some project that they're working on. And then maybe another conversation could be kind of on campus, like not exactly in this professor's office or something like that. So it could just be something related to life on campus, but not purely academic. And then for the lectures, as I mentioned, you have one where the students are participating in terms of like asking a question, answering it. And then you could also have without the student participation, that's basically just the teacher talking by themselves. And as I mentioned here, you have 60 minutes, basically 10 minutes per audio or 10 minutes per conversation. And so you'll have these two sets per type of question. So 2 conversations, 2 lectures with the students, and 2 lectures without. And in the normal test, you would just have 60 minutes for these 6 of them. And if you have the experimental one, you've got 90 minutes for these 9 conversations. So it could get up to an hour and a half of listening and questions. And you basically have 5 questions per conversation between like a student and professor, and 6 questions for a lecture. So overall, you could have about 50 to 60 questions for the listening section. If I look, the examples that I'm giving you today are coming from one of the TOEFL, the official IBT tests here. So basically, for these sections that they've got here for the listening, they've got about 34 questions in the listening section. For yeah, my math was slightly off there. Sorry. It could be 5 times 6, 30, or it could be up to like yeah, it's about 34. Sorry, my math is slightly off there. So it'd be between 30 and maximum. Well, if you've got 2 conversations, so that's 10 plus 4 lectures times 6 each. So yeah, the math is it's 34. So for that. Okay, and you can only listen to the lectures and the conversations 1 time, and then you're really just your questions are based on what you hear. So it's a way to say like you don't have to use any of your kind of external knowledge about a topic. It's just purely based on what you understood. So so that's good to know. Okay, so what we're going to take a look here is these. What are the kinds of questions that they put in here? So you've got 3 types. So in the reading section, we had at least like 8 types of different questions. It could be vocabulary, inference, summary, negative, exceptions, and things like that. The listening ones are a lot more simple. It's just kind of what are some of the main points. So your basic comprehension of what's in the test, what's in that conversation or the lecture, making also connections between the information that you hear. So that could be organizing what you heard. It could be making inferences. It could be like connecting the dots, basically. And then it could also be pragmatic in terms of listening to the speaker's intonation or listening to their voice in terms of like what they're trying to express. So it's really important to kind of be sensitive to how somebody's using their voice. I talk about this a lot in the speaking section with students in terms of realizing that communication is it's a mix of body language, it's a mix of how you use your voice, and it's also the words themselves. So in terms of the listening section, it isn't purely just the words themselves, the information that the people are saying. It is also the voice, the intonation, how they express their opinion with their voice, and how certain they sound about something, or whether they like something or they don't like something, or they believe it or they don't believe it. So you need to do a lot of training with, like, how do you express your feelings or emotions and your certainty and confidence? Like, how do people do that? How do actors do that? So if you can do some listening skills related to the voice itself, that would help you in this section. So it isn't just purely taking notes and answering questions. It is also a little bit of, like, what were they trying to express with their voice when they said something? And when you have that kind of a question, usually what happens is they will give you a short sample, like maybe about 10 seconds or so, of part of the conversation or part of the lecture. And they'll say, like, well, what was the professor or what was the student trying to express when they said this? And then you'll listen to that little extract, and then you'll try to identify, like, what emotion or what feeling or what was it that they were trying to express with their voice there. So sometimes it isn't completely just the word itself, it's also the emotion that's attached with it through the intonation. So that is something you need to practice for the listening section. So, okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a sample. We're going to do two samples. This first one is a conversation between a student and professor. I'm going to play that in a second. And I would like you now, like, get your pencil and paper or pencil and pen ready so you can take notes. And just like on the test, I'm only going to play it once. And while I am listening to it, I'm also going to take some notes. So this is a good reminder for me. Where is my note paper? So just 1 second here. So I've got my note paper, and let me make sure I have my pencil. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm going about ready to go here for taking these notes. Okay. And so we got here this listen to a conversation between a student and her professor. Let me get the audio file there.
Listen to a conversation between a student and her professor.
Before we get started, I just wanted to say I'm glad you chose food science for your major course of study.
Yeah, it seems like a great industry to get involved with. I mean, with a 4-year degree in food science, I'll always be able to find a job.
You're absolutely right. Before entering academia, I worked as a scientist for several food manufacturers and for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I even worked on a commercial fishing boat in Alaska a couple of summers while I was an undergraduate. We'd bring in the day's catch to a floating processor boat where the fish got cleaned, packaged, and frozen right at sea.
That's amazing. As a matter of fact, I'm sort of interested in food packaging.
Well, for that, you'll need a strong background in physics, math, and chemistry.
Those are my best subjects. For a long time, I was leaning towards getting my degree in engineering.
Well, then you shouldn't have a problem. And fortunately, at this university, the Department of Food Science offers a program in food packaging. Elsewhere, you might have to hammer courses together on your own.
I guess I lucked out then. So since my appointment today is to discuss my term paper topic, I wanted to ask, could I write about food packaging? I realize we're supposed to research foodborne bacteria, but food packaging must play a role in all of that, right?
Absolutely. Maybe you should do some preliminary research on that.
I have. That's the problem. I'm overwhelmed.
Well, in your reading, did anything interest you in particular? I mean, something you'd like to investigate.
Well, I was surprised about the different types of packaging used for milk. You know, clear plastic bottles, opaque bottles, cardboard containers.
True. In fact, the type of packaging has something to do with the way milk's treated against bacteria.
Yeah, and I read a study that showed how light can give milk a funny flavor and decrease its nutritional value. And yet most milk bottles are clear. What's up with that?
Well, consumers like being able to visually examine the color of the milk. That might be one reason that opaque bottles haven't really caught on. But that study, I'm sure there's more studies on the subject. You shouldn't base your paper on only one study.
Maybe I should write about those opaque plastic bottles. Find out if there's any scientific reasons they aren't used more widely. Maybe opaque bottles aren't as good at keeping bacteria from growing in milk after the bottle's been opened or something. But where to begin researching this? I don't have
You know, there's a dairy not far from here in Chelsea. It was one of the first dairies to bottle milk in opaque plastic, but now they're using clear plastic again. And they're always very supportive of the university and our students, so if you wanted...
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, great. So how did that go? Was that overwhelming? Did you were you able to take some notes there? So let me know how you feel about that. Were you able to understand a lot of it? Were you able to get some notes there? Just waiting to get some comments here to see how that went, how you felt about the information there. Can you write some notes about like what you understood overall from that conversation? What were they talking about? What was the point of that conversation? What were they talking about? So I just still see some comments about that you could see the lecture. I'm going to just refresh the screen a second there. Make sure these notes are up to date. Okay. So yes. Okay, got practically all, made some notes. Okay, yeah, great, Daria. Could you put a comment there about some of the things that you understood? And I'm going to kind of copy the notes that I took. I took them on a separate screen on a separate computer, but I'm just going to kind of copy over what I understood here. So I'm going to put this here. So I got basically, we're talking about food science. This student, she's planning on getting like a 4-year degree in food science. And that'll help her find a job, but she's not here to talk about like finding a work and all that. But the professor, he talks about his work experience. So we have the professor, his work experience before becoming a professor. So he mentions like he worked on a boat, fishing boat, and that they did they worked with these like this fishing boat and food processing. So and then that gets into more and more details about, in this conversation, and they talk about food packaging as well. And he talks about like that this girl, the student would probably need to know some things about like math and chemistry, and I think I kind of lost the details about something else as well. And she said, "Oh, that's not a problem." She wanted to be an engineer. That's some extra information there, I think. And then I got a little confused here because it sounded like at first it sounded like he said "unfortunately," something about the food science department at the university about food packaging, but it turns out actually he was saying fortunately. So my hearing was actually a little off there between unfortunately or fortunately. So basically the department at that university has something about food packaging. And then now we get into the meat of this conversation, which is the term paper. Like, okay, that seems to be why she's there. So there's a term paper. Apparently she's supposed to write about like food-borne bacteria. And she says she was wondering if it would be okay if she could write about food packaging instead. And then the professor says, oh yeah, have you done some research? And then she's saying like, yeah, I've been doing a lot of research, but like she doesn't quite know kind of what to focus on. And then they look at like milk packaging. And then they look at the kind of the different types of packaging. So there were things here about like clear, opaque, cardboard. So those were different types. And that they were some relationship with how they stop bacteria. Like what is the purpose of that packaging? And there's also the effect of light and how it affects the quality of the milk. And then they were asking about like, but some consumers prefer clear packaging for milk so they can see the color of the milk. And that there was some study about opaque. So opaque means you can't see through it. It's dark, you can't see through it. And then the student talked about something about related to wondering if there might be some relationship between what happens once you open an opaque carton of milk or something like that. Does something happen with bacteria? And the professor tells her something like, don't just base your research on one source. Try to get multiple sources. And then he mentions there's a dairy nearby in Chelsea. We don't know where these people are located, but there was a city called Chelsea or a town called Chelsea, that there's a dairy. They used to use opaque packaging, but now they do clear. And the professor says something that the people at the dairy have been supportive of the university. So those are a lot of the notes that I've gotten here. I probably took more notes than what I'm showing you on the screen right now, but that's basically some of the main things I got from that. I'm going to go back over here and see. So yeah, Anastasia, you kind of missed half of it, unfortunately. Okay, just joined. Okay, well, thank you for joining in. So you'll probably be able to kind of listen to this again and check your notes. So now let's get into the questions themselves. So those were my notes, and hopefully my notes are going to help me. So I mean, I did prepare this presentation for you and going through this, but I did not actually listen to that conversation beforehand. So what you just saw me do is the notes that I would have probably taken if I were on the test. And now I'm going to go through the questions, and hopefully, I mean, I had a copy of the questions in here, but I don't completely remember them. So I'm going to kind of go through these questions based on the notes that I took. Okay, so here next are the questions. Okay, so why does the woman go to see the professor? So is it to get advice on the topic of a term paper? I think so, yeah. Or is it to discuss different types of food packaging? Well, that's not the complete purpose of why she went. To find out if the university will offer courses in food packaging. He already mentioned that the university does offer that. To ask about jobs in the food industry. Well, she mentioned the first sentence saying like, yeah, getting a 4-year degree in food science means she'll be able to find a job, but that wasn't the real purpose of this conversation. That was just the beginning of it. So I could see how answers C and D could probably confuse me, and potentially B could be like a side comment in there. It was just a side detail. But definitely B, C, and D are not the right answers. They're not the real reason why she went to go talk to the professor. So the real reason here is this choice A, to get advice on the topic of her term paper. That's why she went to go see him. Okay. Yeah, another comment here from German that you heard it as unfortunately. So I don't know if that is a mistake, the recording, or if it's just, I don't know. But thank you for confirming that. That kind of makes me feel like, I'm not alone. Okay, great. So now question 2. So why does the professor mention his previous jobs? To explain why the woman should study math and physics and chemistry. I think that was related to something else in there. To recommend the woman get a summer job on a fishing boat? No, I don't think that's why he was mentioning that. To point out that industry jobs can lead to a teaching career? No, I don't think he was there to kind of give her career advice or to confirm an assumption the woman made about finding a job. So yeah, I think it's this one. I think it's the fact that she says, like, oh yeah, having a 4-year degree means I'll be able to find a job or something. And he says, yeah, he had studied a science and then had kind of confirming what she was saying. So I would say it's D. I would not really try to get distracted by answer A, B, or C. I would just go straight to this D. So as you can see so far from the questions and the answers, specifically comparing this to the reading section, this is a lot less intense. This is a lot less distracting. And it's a good idea if you go through your notes, get an idea of what is the conversation about, what is this lecture about, and what's the purpose, and try to look at the question itself and try to think of it on your own before looking at the answers. That'll give you a bit of a hypothesis of which answer you're looking for. Not exactly of, okay, I've got these 4 choices, and now what? But kind of go into this expecting an answer, expecting to kind of answer it on your own, and then figuring out which one of these answers kind of fits what you're looking for. That's a little bit better way to look at this, because you could get distracted by these misleading answers, but I would say these misleading answers, they're not as bad as on the reading section, which are very misleading and tricky. So if you get distracted, the reading section could be a little bit more tricky. But okay, so far I would say 1A, and I'd say 2D, based on what I remember about this information and about this question here about like the job experience, work experience. Okay, next. Question 3. Okay, the woman mentions a research study of milk packaging. What was the finding of that study? So I think she was saying something about, I mean, just from my memory in the notes here, there's something about the relationship with like the bacteria, and you had the differences between like clear packaging, opaque packaging, cardboard packaging, and this one's a little tricky. So plastic containers may change the flavor. No, it's not the plastic itself that changes it. Okay, is it light may negatively affect the quality of the milk? There I do have to look into my notes, and I would say that I did have, like, she was talking very quickly in this section, so I did have something like light decrease. That's not very helpful in my notes. So I'm gonna keep going here. Okay, people prefer to buy milk in see-through containers. No, I don't. I mean, I think the professor mentioned that. Opaque containers are effective in protecting milk from bacteria. Yeah, well, this one's a little tricky. I mean, each one of those seem kind of valid. I probably would miss this question on the test, unfortunately. If my notes like if I was not catching up with the conversation, I could miss this one. So you need to keep an eye, like keep an eye on this. You need to test your writing skills because you don't want to take verbatim, as I mentioned. And as an anecdote, I studied French at the Sorbonne in Paris in like 2002, 2003. I was there as about 15 years ago. And my French was not all that, like, my listening skills were one thing, but my note-taking skills were terrible. And I wanted to take verbatim. I wanted to write down everything that what the teacher was saying. But unfortunately, what often happened is that I caught the first part of the first sentence, the second part of the second sentence, and the third part of the third sentence. So as you can imagine, my notes were horrible. I had this Frankenstein sentence that was part of a first sentence, part of a second sentence, part of a third sentence, and it just didn't make any sense at all. So you have to really get good at your note-taking skills to kind of process information. Don't do it verbatim, but realize like what is the essence of information that's going on so that you don't like, because they will be speaking quickly. I recognize that I'm also speaking quickly right now. So if you were trying to take notes on what I'm saying, you might have difficulty catching up or staying up with the pace. But you need to be able to get used to synthesizing, paraphrasing, summarizing, putting concepts into your own words and jotting them down. That's a skill that you also need for the speaking section, but you will also need this for the listening section to like be able to keep up with the information, because you can't hit pause during this. So you don't want to get overwhelmed, stress out, panic, and then get distracted. So you need to practice your note-taking skills as much as you can. I would recommend, in addition to the listening practice that you can do online, and I would go take a look at certain like TED Talks, for example. Take notes while you are watching the video, and then go back and watch them a second time with subtitles, and try to see if you caught some of the words that they're talking about or some of the concepts they were talking about. And this is also an exercise that I like to do with students sometimes, is like compare our notes. Here's the same audio file. Here's the notes that I took. What are the notes that you took? And then see what information we both got. So I recognize, even as a native speaker, I'm not perfect. And these are skills that I need to practice as well. So so you need to keep going through this. But right now, I would say for 3, it's a little tricky. I think I probably would get this wrong. So I'm going to call this out to you guys. That what notes did you take for related to this question 3? What notes did you have there that'll kind of confirm this answer? Okay, so we'll go to question 4. Okay, what does the professor imply about the dairy in Chelsea? So it has plans to start bottling milk. No, it's not planning to. They used to. So that's a key kind of way to distract you with that information. It's past versus future. So this one is it was past, not future. Some of its employees attended the university. I don't think he said that. Employees there might be able to provide useful information. Yeah, I think so, because he said they were supportive of the university. He worked there before joining the university faculty. No, he mentioned other stuff that he had done, like a boat and the government and some other stuff, but he didn't mention that dairy. So I think the purpose why he was mentioning that, or what he was implying, is that they've been supportive of the university, so they could probably help her with her research. So I would say 4C. And unfortunately, I'm stuck on 3. I did get some notes about light, but I don't think I'm not very confident about number 3. Okay, and finally, okay, we've got this question 5. Let me get you the audio for this one. So this is saying, listen again to part of the conversation.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
Maybe you should do some preliminary research on that.
I have. That's the problem. I'm overwhelmed.
What does the woman mean when she says this?
I'm overwhelmed.
Okay, so when somebody's overwhelmed, and in this case related to her research, I think I don't think it's related to this conflicting information. I think, well, it's not that she's too busy, no. Or it's not that the information is not available, no. I think it's that, like, so the topic she's researching is too broad, like broad meaning it's a very big topic. So she doesn't quite know where to focus. I think it's C. I think this being overwhelmed, it's not that there's information that is like saying one thing and another. She didn't say that. I think it was just of like, well, what could she talk about? So it's a very broad subject, because I think she was talking about like food-borne bacteria. I think that was the topic. And she wanted to focus on packaging. And then there were different types of packaging. So it was a very broad, yeah, this is, I would say letter C for 5. So going into these answers, so why does the woman go to see the professor? I mean, as I said, I prepared this presentation, so I have the answers there, but I didn't completely memorize them. So I was trying to go through this as honestly as I would if I were on the test. So why does the woman go to see the professor? A, to get advice on the topic of her term paper. Yeah, I got that. So that was the main thing I caught. Why does the professor mention his previous jobs? It's to confirm the assumption the woman made about finding a job, since she had this 4-year degree. And then the woman mentions a research study. So this one I would have gotten wrong. I wasn't very convinced. With my notes, they were not good enough. So what was the finding? Light may negatively affect the quality of milk. If I have a chance, I'd go back and listen to this again. I mean, you can listen to it on the recording of this lesson, but on the day of the test, you won't be able to listen to it again. What does the professor imply about the dairy? That yes, they might be able to provide useful information. And then why does the woman mean, what does the woman mean when she says, I'm overwhelmed? The topic she's researching is too broad. So I myself, I probably would have gotten a 4 out of 5 on that. How about you guys? What do you think you would have gotten for that? Would you have gotten 5 out of 5? I mean, that's great if you got 5 out of 5 on those. I would be very, very proud of you. But if you missed one, then that's an opportunity to kind of keep going with your practice and keep studying this. So yeah, let me know what you got for this first one. Okay, now let's keep moving forward. So let's get into the lecture. So this is a lecture, listen to part of a lecture in a theater class. And I've already put the notes that the professor is going to put on the board. So normally those 2 notes would appear during the lecture. They wouldn't appear immediately at the beginning, but that'll be there to help you. And again, I'm going to do take notes on the screen here. So get your pencil and paper ready. And I'm going to play the third audio file here, which is the lecture. So you ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a theater class.
As we have seen, the second half of the 18th century was an exciting time in Europe. It was not only an age of great invention, but social changes also led to a rise in all sorts of entertainment, from reading to museums to travel. And finding himself in the middle of this excitement was an accomplished French painter named Philippe Jacques de Loutherbourg. Loutherbourg arrived in England in 1771 and immediately went to work as a set designer at the famous Drury Lane Theatre in London. From his first shows, Loutherbourg showed a knack for imagination in stage design, all in the interest of creating illusions that allowed the audience to suspend disbelief completely. He accomplished this by giving the stage a greater feeling of depth, which he did by cutting up some of the rigid background scenery and placing it at various angles and distances from the audience. Another realistic touch was using three-dimensional objects on the set, like rocks and bushes, as opposed to two-dimensional painted scenery. He also paid much more attention to lighting and sound than had been done before. Now, these sets were so elaborate that many people attended the theater more for them than for the actors or the story. At the time, people were wild for travel and for experiencing new places, but not everyone could afford it. Lutherborg outdid himself, however, with a show that he set up in his own home. He called it the Eidofusikon. Eidofusikon means something like representation of nature, and that's exactly what he intended to do, create realistic, moving scenes that changed before the audience's eyes. In this, he synthesized all his tricks from Drury Lane: mechanical motion, sound, light, other special effects to create, if you will, an early multimedia production. The Eidofusikon was Lutherborg's attempt to release painting from the constraints of the picture frame. After all, even the most action-filled, exciting painting can represent only one moment in time, and any illusion of movement is gone after the first glance. But Lutherborg, like other contemporary painters, wanted to add the dimension of time to his paintings. You know, the popular thinking is that Lutherborg was influenced by landscape painting. But why can't we say that the Eidofusikon actually influenced the painters? At the very least, we have to consider that it was more of a mutual thing. We know, for example, that the important English landscape painter Thomas Gainsborough attended almost all of the early performances, and his later paintings are notable for their increased color and dynamic use of light. Lutherborg's influence on the theater, though, he was incredibly influential. The way he brought together design and lighting and sound as a unified feature of the stage can easily be seen in English theater's subsequent emphasis on lighting and motion. Now, the Eidofusikon stage was actually a box, a few meters wide, a couple meters tall, and a couple meters deep. That is, the action took place within this box. This was much smaller, of course, than the usual stage, but it also allowed Lutherborg to concentrate the lighting to better effect. Also, the audience was in the dark, which wouldn't be a common feature of the theater until 100 years later. The show consisted of a series of scenes. For example, a view of London from sunrise that changes as the day moves on. Mechanical figures, such as cattle, moved across the scene, and ships sailed along the river. But what really got people was the attention to detail, much like his work at Drury Lane. So, for example, he painted very realistic ships and varied their size depending on their distance from the audience. Small boats moved more quickly across the foreground than larger ones did that were closer to the horizon. Other effects, like waves, were also very convincing. They reflected sunlight or moonlight depending on the time of day or night. Even the colors changed as they would in nature. Sound and light were important in making his productions realistic. He used a great number of lamps, and he was able to change colors of light by using variously colored pieces of glass to create effects like passing clouds that subtly change in color. Furthermore, he used effects to make patterns of shadow and light, rather than using the uniform lighting that was common at the time. And many of the sound effects he pioneered are still in use today, like creating thunder by pulling on one of the corners of a thin copper sheet. One of his most popular scenes was of a storm. And there's a story that on one occasion, an actual storm passed overhead during the show. And some people went outside and they claimed Lutherborg's thunder was actually better than the real thunder.
Okay, so that was a really intense lecture. I have way too many notes. So how did you guys do for this theater lecture? There's just a lot of information that's in there. So and this guy just does not stop talking. So I'm going to move this here. So let's get some of the notes that are in here. So we've got, we're talking about the theater in the second half of the 18th century Europe. So I don't know about you, but second half of the 18th century, well 18th century, that's the 1700s. So this is basically 1750 to 1800. So you want to kind of simplify that so you can get the numbers pretty easily to know, like, what are we talking about? And we talk about this French painter, Luderberg, who moved to England in 1781. So we're looking at the 1781. What do we know about that time? Well, so he was a set designer. He worked at this one theater. He had a lot of imagination, set design. What else on here? He was famous for this feeling of depth for the stage, and he would kind of cut up scenery and use different angles and distances for that. What else on here? He used 3D objects on the stage as opposed to the 2D. So paintings. What else on here? He used also lighting, sound, and that actually people went to see the set design more than the actors or the story. So his set design was very popular. Also, at the time, people wanted to travel. They were very interested in what was it here, like museums. They were also interested in like reading. So there were a lot of things that were going on, as the professor said, about like social change. So that was some motivation. So these sets kind of give people that sense of going somewhere that they hadn't been before. And he had this one concept. I didn't write the word down because it was provided there. This oi something with the E, and that was something of represent nature. And then he did like a whole multimedia production. And this was with motion, light, sound, and he wanted to release painting from the picture frame because a picture could only express a moment. So a painting was like one brief moment, and the theater was like multiple moments with change. And they're talking about the influence of the theater in on landscape painters. And so there was a mutual influence between him and landscape painters. So the professor mentions here the English painter Gainsborough, and he talks about how Gainsborough actually attended a lot of these performances, and later in Gainsborough's paintings you can see more color and attention to like the lighting. So there were things in Gainsborough's paintings, and this Luderberg had an influence obviously on English theater. There was something here about that the people who went to see this, they were in the dark, and he says that was not a common thing until later. So so it was, at the time, it was not common for theater goers to be in the dark. That seemed to be an important detail there. And then there was the way that like ships would move at the front of the box, and then bigger ships at the back for the horizon, and the way colors might be changed as they do in nature. And then there was sound and lights that were realistic with changes, and lamps and the colors, and like passing clouds and effects of shadow. So a lot of things with sound and light, and then even sound effects. So so he used like a copper sheet that he would shake to create thunder. And there was an anecdote about how there was a storm during one performance, and that one person said Luderberg's thunder was more impressive than real thunder. So so those are some of the notes that I got from this. This is definitely way too much information. I do recognize that. This is really difficult. So so yeah, it just keeps going. It's just a lot of information. Okay, so let's take a look at the questions here. Okay, so what does the professor mainly discuss? So the history of set design in English theater. Well, not a complete history. A French painter's innovations in set design. Yeah, I think they're talking about B here. This Luderberg. A kind of play popular in 18th century English theater. No. A leading playwright. No, he wasn't the playwright. He was this set designer. So I would say B. I would say this letter B. That wasn't too difficult there. Okay, number 2, according to the professor, how did Luderberg create a feeling of greater depth on the stage? So 2 answers here. So he enlarged the state area. No. He used mainly dark colors in the painted backgrounds. No, I don't. No, he tried to have. No, it wasn't that one. He carefully spaced separate pieces of scenery. Yes. Yeah, he did that. He used 3-dimensional objects in his sets. Yeah, he did that as well. He had rocks and things like bushes. So this says choose 2 answers. I would say C and D. I'm not getting really distracted about answers A and B. I would put C and D. Okay, next on here, question 3. What can be inferred about theatergoers in late 18th century England? They did not accept his set designs. No, I think they loved him. They were accustomed to sitting in dark theaters. Well, accustomed to means like they did that. And I think no, because the professor said here that that was not common until later. So I would say this is probably B. At first, I would say that this one, or they were accustomed to. No, actually, no. It's the opposite. They were not accustomed. So no, you have to be careful with that one. I know the information. I know I took the notes on this, but the wording is very important. So what can be inferred about theatergoers? They were accustomed? No, they were not accustomed. So I have to be very careful with that one. So that's a tricky answer where they've got information that I know, but it's worded the opposite way. So be very careful with those kinds of answers. Okay. C, most of them attended the theater mainly to see popular actors. No, they actually wanted to go see his set design because his set design was actually even more popular than the actors or the story, according to the professor. Okay, so this leads me to the last one. Some of them use the theater as a substitute for travel. Yeah, that makes sense. So A is just, it's like wrong. B was misleading because it's the opposite of what I was thinking there. C is also wrong because it's the wrong information. So I would say this is D, number 3. So that's a little bit of the logic that I would use to get to those answers. And then 4, okay, what is the professor's opinions about the relationship between English landscape painters and Luderberg? Well, he said that it was like mutual influence. So it was part that Luderberg, like he wanted the free painting from the frame because it only represented one moment. So he wanted to be able to have like multiple moments. But he also said that painting influenced him. So it seemed to kind of go both ways. And they talk about Gainsborough and how Luderberg influenced him. So it does seem to go back and forth here. So, okay. So he thinks English painters were unfair in the criticism. No, there was no criticism that they talked about here. B, he thinks Luderberg's relationship with English landscape painters was less important than most experts think. No, I don't. No, I think that's wrong. So I think A and B are not correct. He thinks Lutherberg and the English landscape painters probably influenced each other. Yeah, that makes sense with the mutual thing. He thinks English landscape painters helped Lutherberg's work gain in popularity. No, I don't think that's like a. I think that's just a very minor observation. I think it's C. So I would put C here for question 4. So now we get to the last 2 questions here. So 5. What are 2 notable features of the I can't pronounce this. I'm sorry. Eudophysikon. So choose 2 answers. It was identical. No, it was different. It did not make use of actors. No, I don't think that it did not make use of it. I don't think that was there. It used paintings made by Gainsborough. And here, no, it didn't. No, it had an influence, but it didn't use his paintings. It had a small stage. Yes, it had a small stage. So it's not A, it's not C. So I'm left with B and D. So I know it was D. I know it had a small stage, a small box. At first I was a little, like my notes were not really, like I had a lot of notes, but I guess I missed this piece of information about letter B. But because I have to choose 2 answers, I'm going to say D and B. But I know A and C are wrong, so I'm left with B and D. Okay, and then 6, why does the professor mention a storm that passed over Lutherberg's home? To demonstrate the authenticity of the sound effects? No. To provide context and a discussion about lighting effects? No. One of the problems? No. To explain how Lutherberg got an idea? No. Demonstrate the authenticity? Well, I'm gonna have to go with A. I'm gonna have to go with A. But they were talking about the sound effects with the storm and the copper sheet and all that, but they weren't talking about lighting. They weren't talking about a problem. They weren't exactly talking about the inspiration for the idea. I think this is A. This one's not so obvious at first glance, but I would say it's related to the sound effect, because the anecdote was that his sound effect sounded even more impressive than actual thunder. So those are some of those details there. And I'll put lastly here these answers. So what does the professor mainly discuss? A French painter's innovations in the set design, and then choosing the 2 answers for how did he create this sense of depth. So he placed pieces of scenery in separate places, and he used 3D objects. So, yeah, what can be inferred about the theater goers? Yes, they use theater as a form of travel or substitute for travel. The opinion about the relationship between the English landscape painters and Lutherberg. So that was mutual influence. So yeah, C, they influenced each other. And what the notable features. So, okay, yeah, it didn't use actors. I missed that in my notes, but from inference, from the answers, I got B and D. So it, and lastly, why does the professor mention a storm? Because yeah, the sound effects. So this one, I probably would have gotten lucky for that answer 5, but I would have gotten 6 out of 6 on here. So how do you guys, how would you guys have done for this? Okay, great. So I'm gonna probably turn off my screen here. I think you've been able to see this slide enough, and you'll be able to see that later. Okay, in the replay if you want. So here I am again. Hi, did you miss me? Great for the note taking that you guys have said here. German, you got plenty of the notes as well, and Anna, Philippe paid attention to special effects and scene decoration. Nobody did that before him. Yeah, so you got a lot of the notes here. So yeah, you want to keep practice. Realize that in the listening section, these are longer lectures. These are a little bit longer conversations. They're not section where there might be like 1-2 minutes, and it's just very focused on what you need to listen to. This is note taking and answering these questions, about 5 or 6 of these questions per thing. If it's 5 for the conversation and 6 for the lecture, but okay. So So yeah, that was great. You raised my listening skills on the next one. But I have one more question. Why does your computer work in Spanish? Interesting question. I'm located in Mexico City, and the computer that I purchased was purchased here. So the keyboard, the hardware, all of that, it's in Spanish. So yeah, interesting question. Yes, I'm an English speaker. I would love to have an English-speaking computer, but I purchased this one in Mexico. That's why it's there in Spanish. Okay. So any TOEFL related questions there? I hope you guys have found this useful. I hope you found me going through these answers and giving you, showing you my notes has been a way to kind of compare, contrast your own note-taking skills and how you would go to these answers. So there would be another listening type, which would involve students participating in the discussion and answering some of those things. We kind of ran out of time to do that today. I'm kind of over time today. But we had lots of material to go through with those two audio files and the questions and kind of describing how the listening section is structured. So in this case, so we're going to wrap this up here. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will still take a look at them and answer them later. But I'm happy to hear that you have found these lessons useful. Thank you, Daria, for that comment. I appreciate that. And pretty soon we're going to probably send out a survey so we can see how can we continue to help you with your TOEFL preparations and with your English preparations in general. So very useful to get your feedback on that and know how can we continue to help you. So thank you very much for watching today, and go back and listen to the whole playlist of these other lessons that we've done for the speaking section, for the writing section, for the reading section. You can watch this again and practice. So you've got over about 14 hours worth of material. You've got more than enough, and I keep talking really quickly, so I would definitely go watch those again and take some notes. So there's a lot of content in those videos. So I hope you got a lot of value out of these lessons, and see you soon. We'll see you next time, and hopefully we'll have some more material that will be helping you for your preparations. Take care. Have a good day, good evening, and we'll see you soon.